What has happened is the abnormality has become a normality. And there are a number of factors that are linked to that. Some it relates to socio-economic factors, and also the fact that sometimes if the lady is not employed, depending on the guy tends to think that he's having a power over the woman. So there are economics of that, and also the issue of the blessers. So those are socio-economic factors, and I think in the main is the issue of moral decay. There are no longer morals in our society. So what is happening in the society, it mirrors what starts from the families. Perhaps parents are also failing to raise their kids in a proper way, because in the olden days you were raised to be independent, whether you are a boy or a girl. I remember growing up, I would do anything at home, from washing the dishes up to do the garden work. And being raised by my grandmother, she taught me how to treat a woman and any person for that matter. So this issue starts from home, the foundation, and then it goes to the society and the community. And the third element, I think the community has also failed to play its role. Because in the olden days, if someone was found or seen beating a woman, that was more of a taboo, and that person would be disciplined. It's worse if they were married. The family members will discuss the issue, and they will perform of a punishment to the husband as a way of, in a way, calling him into order. So I think in the main there are a number of factors that are contributing to that, but it also says that perhaps the present government is failing, because I think there's more of a rhetoric. The gender issue has become politicized. Political leaders or politicians, they tend to use it for their own goals, and we saw in Parliament a few months ago, and then also even now when they engage, whether you see the EFF or President Ramaphosa or the DA, I think they are not coming up with concrete solutions, because to have a policy or to have an act or to have an imbizo, those things, they just don't take the struggle for women further. So I think even the government can do better, especially the recent one you see of the lady in Soweto. I think that was inhumane to kill a woman in that way. Someone was 8 months pregnant. Hence I'm saying it also calls upon the religious leaders, it calls upon the traditional leaders, it calls upon everyone, because this is a societal problem. No one can say, no, it doesn't affect me. Because we all have sisters and all that stuff, so you are not sure whether your sister will be the next one. So hence I'm saying it is a societal issue, and all of us should come together and try to find a solution, and also address issues of unemployment, and change the mindset perhaps, because it also starts in the way we raise kids in a stereotypical way, where there are stereotypes that a boy should behave in a particular way. You always look down upon a woman, and there's also a history that relates to that. For instance, there's this social hierarchy. When we were colonized and all that, there were these theories that they introduced, where there was a social racialized hierarchy. Black people were at the bottom of the social strata, and that then translated to the role of women, because men were oppressed, but they will in turn oppress women. So that changed the nature and the culture of Africans, is because of this coloniality of being. So I think if we can understand the culture and the history of that, for instance, this violence, it can be also be traced to apartheid era, how they used to kill people, and sometimes they will treat that more like a party, or they will celebrate for killing someone. So there is a psychological element that we need to deal with as a nation, because I think as a nation we have not healed and not passed from the apartheid era to the present. There are still wounds. In a way, we are more of a wounded nation, and this translates to various spheres of life. And because women don't have power, so a male will always have that leverage over women and exercise their power. So I think it is those number of factors.
And speaking of are fixing the community and the culture of doing things. We see more often in our culture, and particularly black culture, amaXhosa, where someone is getting married, bayayalwa, and they are told that they should obey and that you fix things, you stay in a marriage. Could that have a role, though, in how women stick it out and stay in abusive relationships?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that culturally, it's a marriage not just between the two individuals, it's the families that are involved. Hence, the couple is given a freedom to try and find solution to their problems if they have problems. And if they can't reach an agreement or consensus, they can bring in the in-laws, abo mamazala, tatazala, and all that, the father-in-law and the mother-in-law, and other family members to try and find the solution, because in essence, the families or the elders of the family don't want a man that will victimize or a man that will abuse a woman. Hence, you'll find that sometimes there will be punishment. There will be some punishment that you must pay ingomo to the parents of the woman that you beat or been abusing. So culturally, there is that way of collective approach in trying to find solutions. And that, in essence, was to make women strong. Because, as you were saying, uyayalwa. The significance of that is that a woman, a marriage is a journey. A marriage is an institution on its own. There are challenges that you will encounter. So you must be strong as a woman, or as a wife, you must be strong. And you must be able to protect your family. Because remember, in the olden days, a man wouldn't take a decision without consulting the women. So hence I'm saying, for instance, the issue of patriarchy, that in the olden days it was not there. Women were viewed as inkosazana. You see, there was that respect that was given to a woman. Hence, even a man, before take any decision, will engage the wife. So from that point of view, that ukuyala and the culture, it was just a way of making a woman strong and be prepared for the route or the road that will travel ahead. So from that point of view, I think it is important, and it is important for us to continue doing that. However, if that the problem is that has been misused by other people, that if you're in an abusive affair or marriage, you must remain there. That's not supposed to be the case, because before problems reach that point, you must first try to find a solution, or the elders of the family. So I think sometimes people tend to abuse culture for their own benefits, to say, no, it is my culture perhaps to do things alone, not to consult, or to beat the woman. There's no culture, there's nothing of that nature in African culture. There's nothing of that nature. So hence I'm saying there's yes and no, but if you're looking at it purely from an African point of view, that should not be the case. But the problem, however, would be, which also links to my yes answer, if you're looking at it from a gender point of view, or gender activist, or through the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and other pieces of legislation, you will see that it is presented as wrong. Some of the cultural practices that we're doing are wrong, and the behavior that emanates from them is not acceptable. So I think I will say it is important to continue with that, and I don't think there are ukuyalwa and all that stuff is completely wrong. It's not. But it calls upon the elders of the family and the couple to find a solution for their problem, and also the elders to play their role, because if you're married, you still remain a child in your parents, and even if your parents are no more, there will always be an elder in the family. And it is those elders that's supposed to bring you together. And a wife or a woman as the heart of the house, that's where, for instance, you get some values or how to behave. As I said, that I was raised by my grandmother. I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandmother was central in my upbringing. So there are values that I learned from her, that she taught me how to behave, how to treat a woman, and how to respect other people. So women are key in as far as raising kids in terms of values, because sometimes you find that the men will teach you in a hard way. So women have that feminine touch and way of convincing and communicating and make things simpler. So the issue of ukuyalwa then is also that pilgrimage or that journey of a woman to from one stage to another, and introducing a woman to the new family.
But also when we look at intlawulo and paying damages, where do we then place that in terms of enabling the situation? Because you'd find in some instances that women have been raped, a woman has been raped, the elders of the family sit and they issue out that there should be damages to be paid, and this matter must not go public, it must not be reported to the police, keep it amongst ourselves. We accept this as punishment, that there's this intlawulo that will be paid.
No, it is wrong. It is wrong. Rape is wrong. And that's something that as a community we need to stand against it. There's no justification for rape. And intlawulo or trying to keep things within the family is also wrong. And in most of the time it happens when the person, the perpetrator, perhaps is the breadwinner, and then they will try to protect the perpetrator at the expense of the victim. And what they are also not considering is the long-term impact of that to the victim and the psychological impact. Imagine you see every day someone who raped you. So that just kills your confidence. And also your being, you lose confidence. So I think it is wrong, and it is also wrong for the families to protect those people. Anyone who's found committing a crime or any form of crime, including rape, that person should be taken into the police, and the police will deal with that. It is wrong. It is wrong. And intlawulo, historically, intlawulo was not a way of encouraging. Because sometimes people who can afford it, they will pay whatever money that is in intlawulo and continue doing the same thing. So it was a way of punishing you to stop what you are doing. And it was not just intlawulo only. There will be a consultation where the elders will try to convince you or to call you into order and tell you how to treat a woman, and as a way of moving away from what you've been doing. So I think it is wrong, and also perhaps it also shows that culture is not static. Culture is dynamic. It changes with time, and sometimes people tend to use culture for their own advantage. And also, at the same time, we need not to use or to hide behind culture for wrong things that some people are doing. It is wrong, or for anyone's imagination to do that. It is wrong. And hence I was saying earlier on, it's a call upon individuals, the family, the elders of the family, the religious leaders, and all of us to come and try to find a solution to this. And that starts with the behavior. Hence I was saying women are the heart of the family. So it is important that there's this kind of promoting social values that won't victimize or be against women in any form and shape.
How do we then, Doc? Because I suppose ukuthwalwa would also form part of the wrongs in culture that you are mentioning, where a child, a 13-year-old, 16-year-old, uyathwalwa to get married to this elderly man. How do you then break that cycle in communities where it has been practiced for so many years, and they strongly and really believe that what they're doing is right because it's their culture?
You see, even then there's a history and tradition of ukuthwala, but that is not the present generation or people who are doing it now. They are not doing it the way it used to. In the olden days, ukuthwala will be done in the sense that a woman, perhaps a guy will identify a woman, then they will go and take it, but there won't be any form of rape or sexual intercourse until the process of negotiating ilobola with the parents is finalized. So there would be no any form of violation of the rights of the girl. And also it was a woman that was matured, a woman that is ready to be taken to that level, because there are stages that a girl grows up. There are certain stages that girl will go and pass. So when the girl is ready, it's then that will happen. And also, it was also about respecting the woman. So hence I'm saying, historically, this cultural practice was more about bringing people together, and there was no rape or anything before the process is concluded.
But when we talk about the process of bringing these families together and making sure that negotiations are successful, these are negotiations between the two families. Does the woman have a say in all that?
You see, in most African communities, it is the elders that will discuss that. It will be the elders that are appointed by the family. In the main, it will be men. It will be men who will discuss that. And then you find that amongst the Zulus, for instance, they also include the aunt. The aunt form part of the team that is negotiating, to also look into account to take into account the interest of the girl. So that's how it is done. But generally, a girl or a woman doesn't form part of that.
Isn't that part of the problem there, that women really have no say even in issues that affect them directly?
You see, women, they will talk via their mothers, because hence I'm saying that in the olden days, women, even though amongst Amaxhosa and other African communities, women don't form part of the negotiations, but the mother can influence the husband or other representative. And most of the time you'll find that the mother is also taking into account the interests or the views of the child, the girl in this case. So indirectly, yes, the women and also the mother are involved. And I don't think that was meant to overlook the interests of the girl or of the woman. However, if you're looking at it through the present constitution and other pieces of legislation, then you will say it is wrong. But from a cultural point of view, it is not. Hence I was saying, for instance, amongst the Zulus, an aunt will be there, and the aunt will also bring in issues that relates to the interests of the girl or of the child. And then in other African communities, Amaxhosa and others, the women or the mother would be indirectly involved through what she will get from the child, and also pass it to the elders of the family. So if you're looking at it purely based on the prescript of the constitution and other pieces of legislation, you will say the rights of the women are not taken into account. Hence, perhaps there are these forms of abuse. But this also takes us to a point where some would argue that the constitution is Eurocentric. The constitution is written from a Western point of view, and the attentions between the African culture and also the Western, or the constitution as it is a Western framed document. So there are these tensions, and the issues of the African culture is not taken into account, and the context. So from the legal point of view, then that's wrong. And also from other pieces of international law, you'll find that it is not acceptable. But if you consider the location and the context of those people who are practicing this, you'll find that there's nothing wrong. And as I was saying, that in some cases you find that the women, the child is indirectly involved, and the interests of that are taken into account.
How do you then move forward, seeing that there's this cultural decay where culture is being taken advantage of, as you say? Well,
the way to move forward is to try to find a balance between the two. The customary marriage has been recognized by the government, and I think even the practices that relates to that should be taken into account. The context that I referred to and the location should also be taken into account. And those elders who are practicing that or representing the family, those families, they should also take into account the human rights issues, because we cannot live in isolation, or those people who are practicing that cannot live in isolation from the rest of the country, and especially that the constitution is framed in a way that is Eurocentric. So if what they are doing is against the constitution, then it will be viewed as against human rights or violating the pieces of the constitution. So it is important that we strike as a community, we strike a balance between the two, but not compromise the African culture. Because most of the time when people try to find a balance between the two, the Western culture dominates. So in this case, I hope we will find a solution that will not alienate the African culture. And perhaps is something that we need to take into account, the elders of the families, but it starts from the family, the elders of the family, the community, and Africans generally try to find a solution to those things, because we should not just put our culture aside or just ignore everything and say our culture is wrong. It's not. But what is wrong is the abuse of culture for whatever reasons, and that's what we should stop, and the elders should also come in to stop that. And same as the traditional leaders. Traditional leaders have a role to play, especially if you go in some of the areas where Uktwala is practiced. It's in the main rural areas, and that's where traditional leaders are strong, so to speak. There is Izibonda, Induna, and all that. So the traditional leaders should also play a role in doing that, and also change the perception about Ukutwala. For instance, the late Ukumgani Umpendolo Wamaxhosa. In some areas, he appointed women as the headman. For instance, if the husband was the chief and he passed on, he later introduced this culture of appointing women, because the representative of the family, whether it's the brother of the chief or the son, they tended not to take into account the interests of the mother. And then Ukumgani Umpendolo of Amaxhosa introduced this, no, the wife should be the one who, hence you find that in some areas around Tujwa, there will be, and also in Pataweth, there will be areas that are under such situation. So that is also an acknowledgement that we cannot only remain in the way we used to do things. We need to take into account the present experiences, and also if you look among other cultures like in the Pombo, amongst the Bapetis, women are even going as far as to be high in the communities in terms of their culture. So there's no way in African culture where a woman has been marginalized or oppressed. But the problem is this tendency of people of misinterpreting culture or abusing culture for their own interests. So I think even here, to find a solution, all community or members of the community should come together and try to balance that, and not at the expense of the African culture.
Well, lastly, Doc, okay, do you view society as a patriarchal society, the country that we live in?
Well, it is, yes, it is. Unfortunately, it is. But I would argue that that was introduced at a particular time in African history. It's a byproduct of colonialism. It's a byproduct of what others will call a Western episteme, this Western coloniality. We lost, as Africans, we lost our being. We live in terms of the standards that have been set by other people. And in that process, there's what is called the recognition by assimilated. In order for us to be recognized by white people, we had to lose our being and be assimilated in their culture. So as part of that recognition by assimilation, the people adopted this the patriarchy, and then it has found expression in our communities, and now it is presented as if it's part of African culture. As I said, in terms of African culture, even the naming of Inkosazana, a girl child is respected, and even as that person grown up to a woman is respected. Hence, you will also notice that there are also idioms that are used to associate the beauty of the natural beauty with a girl child. So that shows the significance of that, and also the fact that the decision-taking processes, a woman was always consulted in the family. The husband wouldn't just take a decision. That shows that there was no patriarchy. But as I was saying, it's because of this colonialism and losing our being, and we're assimilated in other cultures. So that patriarchy has found expression in our culture. So presently, you will say, yes, there is a patriarchy. And I also believe that there is, because men were made to believe that, they are strong and they are better than women. So they are using this patriarchy to express themselves. So there is, and that's also the start of the problem of this gender-based violence, because the society that we live in a way, is promoting patriarchy. It is promoting patriarchy. You find that even if you look in terms of the equity, gender equity, in most places, up to now, since 1994, you find that there are very few women in positions of leadership, both in private and public sector. And if you zoom in into that, you find that the women who are benefiting are white women, because they are perceived as they were oppressed during apartheid, even though they were white. So what they will do in terms of equity, they will appoint or go for white women in most companies, especially in private sector. So we need to have a multi-pronged approach that will try to do away with the patriarchy, both from employment, and also the way of raising a child. When you raise a child, don't raise a child in a way that you promote gender. So I think those are some of the activities that we need to do as a nation, and also to destroy patriarchy, because patriarchy won't take us anywhere. Otherwise, men will feel and believe that they are naturally stronger than women, and also takes to this thing, this argument sometimes that men likes to say, no, women are emotional. We all emotional as human beings. We are emotional, because that the flip side of that, it implies that women can't reason, women can't think, because they are emotional. So then that presupposes that man is cool, calm, and can reason. So in a way, that still promotes this patriarchy. So I think we also need to deal with the psyche of the society, of the individuals, and also the workplace, and how we raise a child. And it will take time. It won't be now, because the present generation, they went through, or they grew up in a community or a society that promotes patriarchy. So it will take perhaps another generations for us as a country or as a nation, as South Africans, to reach a point when patriarchy won't exist. But even in Western countries, even though they might be liberal in terms of their constitution, but there are still elements of patriarchy. So I think it's the struggle for women, it's a struggle for all of us to ensure that there's no patriarchy. We're all human beings, and we're all treated equally. And also the contribution or the potential of all individuals are taken into account, irrespective of the gender. That's why actually people like Elijah Makiwane, the father to Cecilia Makiwane, and also Daisy Machombozi. Daisy, who was married to Machombozi, believed that Elijah Makiwane was the editor of his Gidimi in Lovedale in 1875. And what he did, he believed that no man will have an uneducated woman, or man that will love an uneducated woman. But in essence, what he was trying to do was to say men and women are equals. Even though he was focusing more on education, because back then the education was more for men. It was viewed for men. They were promoting men to go to school. So Elijah Makiwane was one of the people who said, no, education is for everyone, and women should also be educated, hence the likes of Cecilia Makiwane and others. So I think it is also important sometimes in trying to find solutions for the problems that we are faced with, to also go back into our history, because some of these issues are not new, and we will see when we dig into our archives that there are solutions that we can use in moving forward, and also try to find solutions to some of the problems we're faced with.